experience. Anyway, let me talk about some of the misconceptions. I think that's a really good idea about where to start. This is not a conflict that has gone on since time immemorial. Okay? There was never a struggle between Jews and Arabs or Jews and Muslims in Palestine in history, ever. Okay? This is new. This is a function of the rise of nationalism, Zionism, which is a nationalist movement. It has other characteristics, but it's a national movement. The idea that the Jewish people should return to the land of Israel and form a modern nation state. That's a modern, late 19th century political ideology, a nationalist ideology. And it's a function of the rise of Arab nationalism and Palestinian nationalism, none of which existed 200 years ago. You did not have you didn't have Zionism, and you didn't have Arab nationalism in 1823 or in 1873. It did not exist. This is a modern phenomenon, this whole struggle over Palestine. That's the most important thing to understand. And people who tell you, well, this goes back to the Crusades, or this goes back to the Islamic conflict, or this goes back to David and Solomon, are basically repeating nationalist myths. The conflict did not exist for thousands of years between these two groups. Okay, there was conflict over Palestine. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying there was no Jewish-Arab or Muslim-Jewish conflict in Palestine ever in history, ever. In fact, the Jews returned to Jerusalem after the Islamic conquest because the Byzantines wouldn't allow Jews in Jerusalem. So, far from their conflict, the situation in the 7th century was very different. So that brings us to the modern era, which is when Zionism begins and when Arab nationalism begins. And then there's another factor. This struggle has always been mediated and affected by external intervention. If the British don't take Palestine in World War I, if the British don't issue the Balfour Declaration, if the British don't get the League of Nations to give them a mandate for Palestine, none of what follows would have followed in the way that it did. I mean, it's really important to understand this. This is not just Jews and Arabs. This is Zionism, the nationalist project that Theodor Herzl starts in the 1890s. And this is the rise of nationalism among Arabs at about the same time, modern nation-state nationalism, and the intervention of this great imperialist power, Britain. And ever since, it has also been influenced by those kinds of external influences. The resolution to partition Palestine in 1947 is passed by the strong-arm tactics of the United States and the Soviet Union working together. You don't have that bullying by those two superpowers. You don't have a partition resolution. You don't have the State of Israel. The State of Israel is established as a result of a resolution passed by the United Nations General Assembly in 1947. And I could go on and on and on, but I think those are two really important things to understand. It is a modern struggle related to nationalism and external intervention. And it does not go back to time immemorial. I mean, that's how I would start by deconstructing a lot of the myths.